I've lived two lives, one in the shadows and one in the light. Most people will never know about the first one. They'll never see what it took to build an empire from nothing, to transform a whisper of an idea into the powerhouse that is Navarro Tech today. They'll never know that while they applauded my humble existence, I was quietly shaping the world they live in. Welcome to the Soulful Stories channel. Subscribe today and stay updated. Never miss a single story. At the surface, I'm just Camila Duarte, the quiet, underachieving daughter of Eduardo Duarte. The one they dismiss, the one they underestimate, the one they never believed would amount to much. But what they don't know, what they can't know, is that I am CD Navarro. I am the founder, the visionary, the architect of Navarro Tech. I built it from the ground up, brick by brick, in silence. No fanfare, no grand gestures. Just a relentless pursuit of something bigger than the box they tried to keep me in. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. In fact, I didn't even want it anymore. I wanted something more, to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I was capable of redefining success on my own terms. I've hidden in plain sight for years, watching as they dismissed me, thinking I was nothing. Watching as they took everything I did for granted. Now, the time has come for them to see the truth. To see who I've become, what I've built, and how little of it they had to do with. I'm not just the daughter of Eduardo Duarte. I am Navarro Tech. And they're about to find out. It started with a forwarded email. Subject line: Executive Candidates, Final Round. From Navarro Tech Human Resources. I opened it out of routine, but then I saw the names. Beatriz Duarte. Renato Duarte. For a moment, I just stared. My siblings, applying for executive positions at Navarro Tech. My company. The empire they laughed at when it was just a sketch in my notebook. I should have felt anger. Or bitterness. Maybe even fear. But I didn't. What I felt was something far colder. Controlled. Strategic. They had no idea who they were standing in front of, or rather, under. They walked into my world thinking it was theirs to take. Confident. Arrogant. So sure of their importance. Of their last names. Later that same day, a second proposal crossed my desk. A consultancy pitch. From my father. Eduardo Duarte Consultoria Estratégica. I almost laughed. The same man who once told me my ideas were childish now wanted to partner with the very company he called a fantasy. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I didn't show a thing. Not on my face. Not in my voice. Not in my emails. Instead, I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't just a twist of fate. It was a gift. They were coming to me. And they had no idea. This wasn't about revenge. I had nothing to prove to them anymore. But it was about truth. And timing. And control. I smiled to myself, fingers tracing the edge of the desk. If they wanted Navarro Tech, they'd have to go through me. And I was done hiding. I still remember the exact moment they laughed. I had just shared my idea, wide-eyed, hopeful, maybe a little naive. I told them I wanted to create a tech company that merged innovation with social impact. Something meaningful. Something that mattered. Beatriz rolled her eyes first. Renato followed with one of his condescending chuckles. My father didn't even look up from his glass of wine. He just said, "That's not a real business, Camila. It's a phase. You'll grow out of it." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. You'll grow out of it. As if dreaming was a flaw. As if daring to believe I could build something on my own terms was a symptom of immaturity. They didn't just dismiss my idea. They dismissed me. I stopped trying after that night. Stopped sharing. Stopped asking. I realized that waiting for validation from people who only see you as a shadow is a waste of light. So I left. Quietly. No drama. No tears. Just the steady, silent decision to walk away from their version of success. I worked 2 jobs. Taught myself how to code at night. found a small co-working space and started building what would become Navarro Tech with nothing but a second-hand laptop and the fire they accidentally lit inside me. They never asked where I went. And I never volunteered the answer. Funny how people only notice your absence when your presence starts making noise. Now, they're knocking at the gates of the very world they said I couldn't create. And they still don't know who they're dealing with. But they will. People love a success story, but only the glossy version. The truth? It's not glamorous. It's lonely, ruthless, and full of choices no one claps for. By day, I live small. A modest apartment in the outskirts of San Esperanza. Second-hand clothes, public transport, cheap coffee. I let the world believe I was average, invisible even. It was safer that way. By night, I was building an empire. I taught myself everything I didn't know, from code to contracts, from fundraising to failure. I studied until my eyes burned. Worked until my hands cramped. There were nights I didn't sleep. Weeks I didn't speak to anyone. I sacrificed relationships, rest, recognition. But I never stopped. Every investor that slammed a door, every partner that ghosted, every patronizing smile, they fueled me. I took notes, stayed quiet, kept moving. I didn't need applause. I needed results. And slowly they came. A breakthrough project here. A strategic hire there. Bit by bit, Navarro Tech began to breathe on its own. Quietly. Powerfully. My name stayed hidden, but my impact didn't. I watched my company rise from the shadows, shaping policies, empowering communities, innovating in ways those same boardrooms said were unrealistic. I proved them wrong without ever saying a word. The hardest part wasn't the hustle. It was the silence. Wanting to call someone to say, it's working, but having no one who'd understand or care. So I became my own witness, my own cheerleader, my own validation. Because the truth is, I didn't disappear. I evolved. And now, the woman they forgot is the name on every document they're desperate to sign. When their applications landed on my desk, I had two choices: delegate or take matters into my own hands. I chose the latter. Something inside me shifted, not out of bitterness, but clarity. I wasn't interested in humiliating them. That would be too easy, too expected. What I wanted was precision. Truth, revealed not with rage, but with elegance. So I did what they'd never expect. I scheduled the interviews myself. As C.D. Navarro, of course. No camera. Voice only. The illusion of distance preserved. The mystique they so admired. I wanted to see how they'd present themselves to the person they thought they needed to impress, unaware that I was the same person they once told would never last in the real world. I studied their resumes like a strategist scans the battlefield. Beatrice had polished hers to perfection, no surprise there. Buzzwords, brand names, but nothing real beneath the surface. Renato was more reckless, banking on charm and bravado. He'd always believed confidence could cover incompetence. I planned every question with surgical care, not to trap them, but to expose them. To reveal what happens when entitlement meets reality. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was a reckoning. I didn't want them to fail. I wanted them to face who they were and who I had become. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I was orchestrating. Every move deliberate. Every word calculated. The woman they once ignored was now the architect of their next opportunity. And they had no idea. Let the game begin. The interviews were illuminating. Beatrice went first. She spoke with that calculated confidence she's perfected over the years, polished, rehearsed, shallow. She dropped buzzwords like breadcrumbs, hoping I'd follow. When I asked about problem-solving under pressure, she stumbled. When I asked about ethics and leadership, she deflected. I watched the cracks appear beneath her corporate gloss. Then came Renato. He was worse. Arrogant, dismissive, and shockingly unprepared. He talked over me, the CEO he thought was some anonymous gatekeeper. He name-dropped our father like it was currency. I asked about innovation. He talked about connections. I asked about team building. He bragged about dominance. They were auditioning for a world they didn't understand, built by a woman they didn't recognize. And through it all, I kept my voice steady. Neutral. Controlled. Not cold, just unreadable. That's the power they never taught me, how to stay composed while someone reveals exactly who they are. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. Years of silence had prepared me for this moment. They weren't just failing the interview. They were exposing themselves. And I didn't have to lift a finger. Just ask the right questions. After the final call, I sat back in my chair. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just certain. They had spent years underestimating me, believing their path to success was paved by birthright. But success has no bloodline. It demands substance. And they had none. The stage was set. The next move would be mine. And this time, there would be no masks. The moment arrived, and it was as inevitable as the sunrise. I had orchestrated everything to this point. Every question, every pause, every calculated response. But now, the stage was set for the final act. It was time to lift the veil. Time to show them who I really was. I called them into a final meeting. Beatriz, Renato, my father, all of them, sitting there in that conference room, expecting some kind of resolution. What they didn't know was that the resolution was already written. It was just waiting for me to read it aloud. I let the silence stretch for a moment. My voice was calm, almost casual. I think we need to get one thing clear, I said. I'm not just the one deciding who stays and who goes at Navarro Tech. They blinked, confused. Then came the words they hadn't been ready for. I am Navarro Tech. The shock was immediate. Beatriz's mouth fell open. Renato's smugness evaporated, replaced by a flicker of something darker. And my father, the man who once called my dreams a fantasy, looked at me with something like fear. But I wasn't done. I wasn't finished making them see. I stood up slowly, letting the weight of the truth settle into the room. I'm C.D. Navarro, the founder, the CEO, the visionary. And everything you think you know about me, about my company, is a lie. They didn't know how to react. Didn't know how to face the truth that their own flesh and blood had outgrown them in every sense. And as I watched their faces crumble, I couldn't help but smile. Finally, they saw me. And they would never forget. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that feels peaceful. It was suffocating. Every eye in the room was fixed on me, but none of them could meet my gaze directly. Beatriz's face twisted first. Her pride shattered. Her carefully crafted image of success had just crumbled in front of her. She blinked rapidly, trying to compose herself, but the damage was done. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. Renato was next. He scoffed, trying to recover his arrogance, but it came out hollow, desperate. This is a joke, right? He muttered, but even he didn't believe it. His bravado had always been a mask for his insecurity. Now it was exposed for what it was. But my father, Eduardo, his face was a mirror of regret. I saw the fear there. The guilt. The realization that everything he had once dismissed was now standing in front of him, unassailable. I could feel his eyes searching for some way to regain control, but he knew better. He couldn't undo the years of dismissal, the years of telling me I wasn't good enough. The consequences weren't just theirs to bear. There was a weight in the air now, a shift in the family dynamic I couldn't unsee. The old roles were gone. The pedestal they had put themselves on had cracked under the pressure of my truth. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. They didn't need to apologize. They just needed to accept that the game had changed. I was no longer the one begging for recognition. Now, I was the one with the power. It was strange, watching them try to rebuild the pieces of their pride. They approached me cautiously after the revelation, eyes full of hesitation, like they weren't sure if they could be in the same room as me anymore, or if they even should. But I wasn't interested in their guilt. Or their apologies. They could live with that. I had something else in mind. I invited them over to my real home. Not the small apartment I had let them believe was my life. Not the false facade I wore for them all these years. I invited them to the heart of who I had become, the Navarro Tech headquarters, my true sanctuary. Walking through those doors was different from any of the family reunions we had in the past. There was no need to pretend. No need to fight for their approval anymore. I had built something that didn't require validation from people who never understood it or me. When we stood in the center of my world, my father finally spoke. He wasn't proud. Not yet. But he was aware. And that, in itself, was enough for me. I was wrong, he said, his voice small but steady. I should have believed in you. I didn't need him to say it, but it was there, finally. As I watched them walk around my company, seeing the reality of what I had created, I felt a shift within me. It was as if all the years of silence, of waiting for recognition, had evaporated. I was done with that part of my life. Done with seeking their approval. Done with hiding who I really was. Now I could finally breathe freely. I had stepped into the light, and I wasn't looking back. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. This is Soulful Stories, where love and justice always prevail. See you next time.